The People's Platform.
Good evening and welcome to the People's Platform. Our subject tonight is food security for the people, which is an extremely important subject in these troubled times. Our guest tonight is Visakha Tillekeratne, a food technologist by profession, who is the project director for Scaling Up Nutrition People's Forum. She has, among other experiences, done a lot of work for the World Food Programme and the World Health Organization. Visakha, our political leaders always paint a rosy picture, and they've told us that by 2048 we will be a developed nation. But our children can't wait until 2048 to eat. We need to feed them now. And in these troubled times, with the increase in VAT and so many other taxes and economic hardships, where are we now in regard to the food and nutrition situation of our children in this country?
So this is the most important topic, and thank you very much for thinking about it and also inviting me. And I will try to share what little I know. Of course, this is an ocean of dynamics and variables. So today I suppose we can touch on the most important, and we were actually expecting a very big crisis, and we are in crisis in a silent way. It is insidious, it is sometimes beneath the surface, but certainly the proof is in the fact that having slowly but surely improved the nutrition status, especially of our children, malnutrition is on the rise again.
So Visakha, you shared with me this policy document of the government of Sri Lanka. It's the National Nutrition Policy of Sri Lanka, and I had a glance at it, and it's very comprehensive. A very well done document which has been around for a very long time, and of course it has been updated constantly. If our government and our population were to follow the guidelines in this, we would have very little problem with nutrition in this country. But when it comes to setting fiscal objectives like increasing the VAT, Visakha, do you believe that our policymakers, perhaps at the Ministry of Finance, actually look at such documents like these?
If I were to give you an honest answer, and when we look at the inflation, rates of inflation, and of course the government says that supposedly the rates have come down, but there are other elements that have actually increased and complicated the situation, I do not really believe that they take these policies into consideration. And this is not the only policy related to food security. It's the nutrition policy, it's the food, or rather the agriculture policy. Just now we are having something that is late in coming but very much needed, and that is the food safety policy. And then you have trade policies and health policies, so many related policies. But at the end of the day, a policy is a policy. It sets out what you should be doing. But the proof of the pudding is in how you do it, how much you do it, when you do it, and what you do. And that certainly is very slow.
So Visakha, food is not just about having food on the table, which is difficult enough for millions of Sri Lankans today. It's about nutrition. And for children, if you don't give them the correct nutrition, proteins, calcium and so on, their bodies are subject to underdevelopment, stunting, malnourishment and so on. So what types of food should we be focusing on?
In our country, through the various assessments, what we see is that stunting from the time I was a child, and then stunting was about 47% in 1975, and today it has come down to be very balanced about this. It has come down to about 16%, 14%, and rising a little bit again. So longer term chronic undernutrition has been alleviated by various means. Sometimes I call this the pills, powders and potions approach, which is giving a number of handouts or supplements, but that is not the sustainable way. Anyhow, with the improvement of people's wealth and reduction in poverty, and even though today poverty is quite serious, still it came down, and stunting is directly related to poverty. So it reduced with that. But wasting, which is thinness or weight for height, has never come down in the last decade. For 30-40 years, wasting is stagnant at 14%. And then what the government does is, give out various pills and potions to alleviate or stop the situation of wasting going into stunting, because accumulated wasting will actually give you a stunted child. So that has been the approach, but the problem is, and this is not rocket science, food security is access and affordability, it is availability, and it is how you utilize. So in today's context, if we were to speak, the price of the important foodstuffs like protein related meat and fish is exorbitant. So that most important food group is not there. And then you also have livelihoods. People have been thrown out of their jobs, and also indirect taxing and direct taxing reduces the net income available for feeding your child. And also we are really trying to do, but we have not gone far enough on behavior changes, on household financial management. So let me stop there.
Let's take a short commercial break and we'll be right back. In this economic situation today, what would constitute a balanced meal, especially for a family with children?
Yes, so we actually have got the general food plate for Sri Lankans, which is a very good move, and this came a couple of years ago, and it's very easy to understand. And let's put it this way, you have your average plate, and less than half of that plate should be filled with starches, rice or yams or whatever, and we are the only country that eats rice and yams and tubers together. So that should be less than half the plate, and 1/3 should be vegetables and green leaves, and 1/6 of that plate should be protein sources, meat or fish or egg with pulses. Fruit, vegetable and greens, the standard set by WHO for healthy living is 400 grams a day. So we call it 2 veg, 1 green, 2 fruits, 5 a day every day. And if we can add, of course, a cup of yogurt or some dairy product. The government of Sri Lanka really does not encourage powdered milk, and we talk about fresh milk. In fact, we have the food-based dietary guidelines, again updated over many decades, and the food plate is based on the food-based dietary guidelines. So how do we make it an affordable plate? I think that's the more appropriate area that we need to talk. And there are a number of answers. One is that we eat, as I said, the right proportions, the right quantities. In that limitation, not too little, not too much. Sometimes we go overboard on, let's say, eating a whole chicken, a family of 4, over a meal or 2, which is too much. That is without the bone, it's about 800 grams. And you actually need only, even if you are eating chicken for both meals, you need 400 grams. One piece which is like a little larger than a matchstick, or a little over, maybe between 50 to 75 grams. So what happens is, people go overboard on one day and then they have nothing, especially those vulnerable communities. They enjoy for one day, and for the other 5 or 6 days, there is no protein. So first of all, we must know the quantities, and we must know substitution. substitution. For instance, over carrots, not that it's the same, but can we eat pumpkin? Then are we eating a good dose of green leafy vegetables, which are very, very good for fiber and also, good nutrition, giving you lots of vitamins, minerals and antioxidants, but are we eating sufficient? Then how are we preparing our food? Are we burning the green leaves? Are we overcooking the vegetables? So that's the cooking skill, unfortunately, which is also disappearing. So there are a number of things that we can do, including a concept introduced by us, the field nutrition professionals, and I have something that is my pet subject, and this is called a one dish meal. Less than 35 US cents per person, prepared in less than 40 minutes, strictly in one pot, less fuel, less space, less time. So we need to really educate the public on that.
Visakha, how important is the free meal that the government was giving to school children? And I ask this because far too often we have seen governments, when they are short of cash, simply abolish that meal or suspend it. And shouldn't this be the very last thing that the government should stop spending on?
Absolutely. Well, the government should not cut anything, especially during this period, anything that they are doing on actually giving out food. Now, having said that, let me just define the objectives usually of school meals. Actually, school meal is a mid-morning meal, and usually it's not a lunchtime meal. That is because if the children, little stomachs, if it fills up, they will not eat lunch. So it doesn't become an addition, it becomes a substitution. That's number one. So we either give it at breakfast if children have not eaten, or we give it at 10 a.m. So the objective of a school meal is to attract children to school. However, in Sri Lanka, at least at the beginning, in primary school, over 90% children are enrolled, 99% are enrolled. So Sri Lanka does not really have that issue. But it's a retention in school, and especially boys become early school leavers over the years. We only talk about the 10% in university, but we don't talk about the early leavers at grade 7, 8, 9, etc. So it's to keep the child in school, it's to maintain attendance. So these are the objectives of school meals. And at least from the education point of view, and keeping their attention, because if they are low in energy, they will not concentrate. So in order to get the best results out of education and to get them to school, school meals are very important and should not be cut.
Visakha, can you tell us how do we get out of this situation now, this problem of feeding our population, especially our children, during this economic crisis?
First of all, I think in order to look at resources, we really need to weed out what we are giving as welfare all round. And it's not we need to collect or save our resources not only in the food sector. We need to look at health, all the welfare services we are giving out, blanketly. And even though it is a human right, I believe we need to rationalize and distinguish those who can really afford from those who can't. And with those savings, we need to put the money on those pillars that we spoke earlier. Now, the Nutrition Society of Sri Lanka, and I was the president at the time, and we proposed a 10-year plan for food security for all Sri Lankans to the Ministry of Agriculture. Now, the Ministry of Agriculture shoved it aside and said, look, we know enough, we have lots of these campaigns of growing food, so they were very derogatory of this effort. But to answer your question, what we really proposed at the time was count the number of people we have, the demographics, count in which stage of the life cycle they are, and count the calories and the nutrients required as per metabolic demand. Then you have your budget for, or rather your food budget is there, because you know what you require. Then how do you match that? You also need to build in variables like migration. Very soon there will be, very few people left to till the fields. Then how are we going to grow our food? Then tourism. Look at what they consume for part of the year. So look at urban, as I said, the migration factors. Look at weather conditions And of course, now there's a lot of work done on climate resilience, etc. So we need to have a realistic sheet, first of all, and then to see what is it that we are going to supply, as you very rightly asked, for the different food groups to be satisfied. Now, I'll give you an example. Recently, green gram, the price went sky high. It was 1,560 rupees per kilogram. Now it has come down slightly, but we are growing cowpea, but very little green gram. So how do we tell people to eat pulses at an affordable price when we are importing Mysore dal, again, which is now more expensive? Green gram is very expensive, even cowpea is getting more expensive. We need to look at productivity and bringing the prices down. And how do we do that? With rational, of course now we talk about good agriculture practices, rational agriculture, but we have to really get there. Then how do we do the income part? If you don't have sustainable livelihoods, and 80% are rural people, if they don't have a livelihood, how do they buy the food that they should be buying? Then from the garden, we talk a lot about the home garden, but around the world it's very difficult to gather the evidence on the impact of the home garden. Of course, you can substitute from the home garden, but what about the sustainable home garden? Home gardens are there for 3 months and then it stops if there's a weather problem. So what about agriculture extension and monitoring these home gardens? So if I talk about this, there are many things that we can do, and we can feed our people. Either it is through a good robust economy where we even import, but this country, we can actually go for food sovereignty, save food miles and grow our food very close to home.
And on that note, I'm afraid we're out of time tonight. Thank you very much to our guest, Visakha Tillekeratne. Don't go away, because prime time news is coming up next. Thank you for watching. Good night.
The People's Platform.